So if you missed it, yesterday there was a documentary drop from Xbox on an upcoming game next year that I think a number of us have kept an eye on because it seemed really intriguing. But it is the South of Midnight thing. If you're not familiar with this was the thing that was initially shown off in a trailer. I think this was the first trailer. Remember this? Kind of inspired by stop motion. It's very, very beautiful. Like ridiculously pretty. Gonna get the crap copyright struck out of me, but I mean, it looks stunning. This was the first trailer that they showed off, and everybody's like, okay, I'm paying attention. Let's check it out. But the studio behind this is a studio you might not know the name of, Off the Dome, because I can never remember it. But it is the same team that has made another game that was very visually stunning called We Happy Few. It's Compulsion, that's right, Compulsion Games. And if you don't recall We Happy Few, it's this game with like the masks and stuff. It's fine. Like I think it teeters on like going straight into the bad territory at times. It's not the worst thing I've played, but it's also just not at all what I think a lot of people were hoping to get out of it. But very visually stunning, very unique art style. That's where they really, really excel. That's what this team is really good at. And they dropped a documentary, a 30-minute documentary on the game explaining sort of the creation process and stuff. And it's captivated many. So I want to take a little peek at it. I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing, if we'll look at the whole thing, but I do want to look at sort of the broad strokes. So let's see what they've got.
In many ways, Midnight is about bringing people together, and magic is all around you. It's about learning empathy for people who aren't like you. It's finding hidden strengths.
It's so beautifully powerful, and I think that it just sort of leaps off the screen.
There's so much atmospheric potential. The landscapes, they're almost like a character in and of itself.
We made these concept songs for all of the creatures. It's not often you get that creative license.
Her journey paralleled with my journey, and like many of our journeys. Did Mama know about this? She discovers the world is more than what she has known it to be.
Coming up against all of these monsters and large creatures where she can communicate with them, heal them, learn from them. Watching Hazel just fly through the world doing all of these things is just a lot of fun.
I think it looks beautiful. I'm guessing it's going to run like crap. It's just my prediction. Okay. My spidey senses are tingling. I also just freaking love the setting. Like Nikki and I, for our honeymoon, we were supposed to go to like Reykjavik, and we were supposed to go through Scotland and Ireland, and I was gonna get to go to the Guinness like brewery, not distillery, the Guinness brewery. I was so excited. That was like, of course, getting married is great, but that was a huge bonus. The idea of also getting to go to where they make the nectar of the gods. But we didn't get to do that because COVID happened, and they didn't want anybody traveling internationally, full stop. So we kind of pulled a bit of an audible. We went to Florida, which was great. We love theme parks, so that's what we did. And then the following summer, we went to New Orleans, kind of as the second half of our honeymoon. And New Orleans, beautiful, except for like the couple of areas where there's like a lot of people who have been drinking for 5-6 days at a time, and they are on another planet, you know, like I've already told you guys the story of the time we were walking down the road with like our tour guide lady who had lived there her whole life, knew it backwards and forwards. And there's this huge guy walking through the streets in nothing but tighty whities. And he is on another planet. I don't know what he had smoked, snorted, or drank, but he was somewhere else. And he's screaming about, oh, the prophecies were right. I should have read the hieroglyphs. The hieroglyphs could have told us all what we needed to know. Oh, I could see them everywhere. Going on and on and on about the hieroglyphs. I was like, Nikki and I were a little, oh, like we're not used to that. But she just, like, our tour guide just walks right up into his face. Stop! Go away! Walk! And he's like, okay, the hieroglyphs could have told me that too. He just like waddles off. It was honestly pretty impressive. She was very used to dealing with those types of people, apparently. And if you just like walk up and like are very clear and high intensity, it's like, oh, okay, the hieroglyphs could have told me that. Start wandering away. So, but the point is, I love New Orleans. I love the really fascinating cultural blending that has happened there. Because in the US, we do not really have a lot of old cities. We just don't. Like in my state, the newest city would have been or the new like oldest building is probably from like the 1870s, 1880s, maybe 1860s, but that's a stretch. So you don't see a lot of really old buildings. Whereas in New Orleans, you go and there's stuff that's like 350, 400 years old still standing. So it's really fascinating and cool to see kind of the historical side of it. But anyway, I love this setting. I love the art style. I'm eating it up. The graphics in this are crazy. Look at that.
So when I was a kid, I spent a lot of my free time after I had exhausted all the books I wanted to read, exploring sort of all of these abandoned farms and forgotten places.
Humble brag.
And you really,
we get it.
When you
can
walk
read
through a forest in the South, you never know what you're going to find.
Look at that.
Now,
is that not really cool and scary? Some people like what's the term for, there actually is a term for people who are like scared of swamps specifically. I forget what the term is. They told us that on the tours, but swamps are terrifying. Like they are really, really horrifying when you like actually sit down and think about how much could go wrong if you just hopped in here and walked straight. There's like 15 different things that could kill you as you're walking to this tree over here. It's really cool. I don't know why I find that so interesting. I eat it up. I love it. It's that like dance between the orderliness of society and the pure chaos that can be nature, but it's like an ordered chaos. I find it beautiful when like man is living in tandem with something that's trying to kill it at any given moment. I think that's so cool. It's probably why I love the ocean. I love sailing and boats and stuff. It's because I also love just the idea that, yeah, we're going to sail on this thing that wants us dead and will not care one bit if it swallows you whole. I find that fascinating.
As a kid, I would already be at the backside of this little swamp, finding plants like wild grapevines.
Oh, and the trees
that
are
were
beautiful,
so thick and so gigantic. You didn't have to climb them. Mysterious buildings, and they seem to have never served any purpose at all. So you wonder, what was this for? Why is this here? Where did these people who built it go? What happened? It doesn't take too long before the accumulation of mysteries demand an answer, and my imagination provided the answers. So I started inventing adventure stories as I was tramping around and exploring these places that usually featured monsters, and monsters became my best friends. That exhilarating sense of discovery, never knowing what you'll find, this sort of thing is what I wanted to create in a game. The genesis of Midnight was my desire to create a love letter to the South. We are based,
but they're from Montreal. Fascinating. Talk about the polar opposite of Louisiana. I mean, you'd be hard pressed, I guess, other than the French side of it, because New Orleans, shocker, New Orleans, very French. It's kind of like the whole thing there. So maybe that's part of the tie-in. But yeah, Montreal, at least in terms of like the city and the style of play, it's about as opposite as you could possibly get. Oui, indeed.
Based in Montreal, which is in Quebec in Canada, and is pretty far from the South.
Indeed.
We were lucky to have some team members who grew up in the South. None of us were experts in Southern folklore, But we had this monumental task of building a world that was iconic, did feel authentically Southern. And it was with a bunch of creatures that no one in Montreal had ever heard of. I mean, there are lots of people in the South who haven't heard of some of these cryptids. We reached out to Donna Washington, who is a world-renowned storyteller. And she came to our offices and she told a story to the entire company at the time. And it was captivating, it was mesmerizing.
So I spent, I don't even remember what it was, 2 or 3 days, telling stories and taking questions and just sort of immersing the team in folklore. The stories that come out of the Southern, well, Gothic stories is kind of what you're dealing with in South of Midnight, are all stories about surviving in difficult times. They're about facing the things that scare you. They're about tricking the things that scare you. They're about laughing at the things that scare you. But what was interesting with that team was as they got into the stories and they sort of joined us, it became clear, it became more obvious to them what the stories were about.
We liked the idea of not just the South, but the Southern Gothic slant towards the Deep South. The stories are usually set in a small town. They usually involve something supernatural, and they're usually...
Oh, look at it. So these old, like, plantation houses, they would plant these massive trees, and they're the same ones that were planted back 200 years ago. They've just continued to grow. And so, like, they'll have... we went to one plantation that they had planted these little, I think they were magnolia trees, and they started very small, and they have like, you know, the drawings of the place at the time they planted them. And it's just like little trees on the side, like you expect to see here. And now you see them and the trees like look like this. It's crazy. It really is wild. And what's even crazier is like this foliage will grow like that in like a year. You could clean this off and by next August, it's going to be the same. Like it's so freaking wild how much you have to fight nature in this area of the country just to keep your driveway. You know, it's, if you leave it alone, it will be reclaimed very, very quickly.
soaked in atmosphere. There's a thing that I like to think about called...
It's the house from Red Dead 2. A lot of, so I wish I could remember. When I got back from it on stream, we went through it. Oh, this is it. Oak Alley. This one straight up, they took photos of it and used it in Red Dead Redemption 2. This is the one I was thinking of. My camera's behind it, or in front of it. These are those magnolia trees I was just talking about, where they started really small and they've grown for 200 years. And now they just look magical. Like, it's ridiculous. But part of what is so fascinating about it, of course, is all of the horrors that were involved with it, like to make it possible to build something like this way back then. Like, they still have the slave quarters up. Here you can kind of see like the big plantation house. And then over here they have slave quarters, and they have, you know, fields back here, where the cursor is. Like, it might be beautiful on this one area, but there were horrifying things happening back here. And it's that contrast that I find fascinating. You know, the balance between, oh, if you looked at it from this one angle, it would seem so picturesque and beautiful. But then you look at it from another angle and it's horrifying. Look at that. Come on, man. Yeah, the house is crazy. But that's the thing, is like, a lot of people like have this like Southern pride thing, but like these houses were all owned by like wealthy French aristocrats that came in. Like, it wasn't actually really that much of like old school classic, you know, American, whatever. Like, a lot of them were just French aristocrats that came in and had tons of money and built plantations to make even more money. And then when it got a little tricky for them, they left, and they left that behind. They weren't slavers, because slavers are people who are like buying and selling the slaves. They were like sugarcane plantations mostly, or sugarcane. They were whatever it is. They were running plantations using slaves that they bought. But that's part of what I find so crazy about it, is that again, you look at this beautiful house from this angle and it seems really like, oh, this is wonderful. But then you find out more about it. You see behind the veil and you see what made that possible. And it's horrifying and disgusting and gross. And it changes, like it casts a shadow on this beautiful thing. And I find that so fascinating. It's just the contrast of it, where it's not what it seems. You know, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's just a pretty house somebody built a long time ago. No, it's born out of something pretty horrifying, which made it possible. And I find that
like
fascinating.
an imaginary nostalgia for a place. So the idea is that, you know,
you pierce the
it's
veil
okay
guard.
if players have not experienced like where these genres came from originally, but we're sort of reimagining them.
Dude, is that literally? No, okay, it's not the exact same house. It's certainly visually similar, but no, it's not. I was like, no way they just pulled up concept art of basically the same house. But
And celebrating them again to create like a really cohesive atmospheric world. And so for us, how I would have translated that to something visual is really leaning on the weight of the past. That's a big thing for Southern Gothic. Old decaying buildings, overgrowth, quiet places, old houses, places that tell a lot of old stories. And then there's the supernatural sort of magic realism element with ghosts and
Look at that.
myths and legends.
A lot of creatures in these folklore, they sort of balance on the edge between the known and the unknown.
Almost all of the creatures within South of Midnight are inspired by folk tales from the various regions of the South. And if not a folk tale, it's taken from an urban legend that's well on its way to becoming a folk tale. Something's out there, clearly, something anomalous. People become obsessed with learning about them. But to date, no one's really gathered any conclusive evidence or proof that they exist, or really identified what they are.
look at that.
The creatures are all inspired by real folk tales. However, there's not a lot of visual information on the exact look of these creatures, which gave us a lot of flexibility to interpret them. For me, getting the tone, mood, and making sure they had this sort of dark elegance to them was really important.
Mothman.
So while you'll see haints everywhere, every region has a distinctive creature, and they rule entirely. So each kingdom is structured so that you understand, how did a creature become a monster?
The sort of variety of creatures that we have in South of Midnight is really cool. The creatures and just sort of like the wild embodiment of like nature, but also human anxiety is very interesting. But also like human errors and challenges and the ways that we hurt each other sort of manifest as creatures as well. There's some sort of whispered rumors about creatures that you shouldn't cross, that Hazel has to.
Each creature that Hazel meets throughout her journey is going to have a specific impact on her. Some will
For real, who's that? Shaking Bones. He runs this here operation, ferrying desperate folks to places unknown. Places unknown, huh? She grabs Rue's coin from her pocket. See, I can read too.
be forcing her to face things that she has run away from. Others will simply create a huge sense of fear in her and summon her to dig deeper and to believe in herself.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very visually stunning. It really is. And I'm sure they're putting a ton of care into the world building, into all of that stuff. There's no doubt about it. With these types of games, though, it always comes down to kind of what you are looking to get out of it. Because if you are looking at this and you're hoping to get like a Soulsborne level combat, I'm guessing you're not going to get that. And I think that's okay. Okay, like that's not where this game is going to excel. This game is going to excel in the ambiance, in the world building. It's visually very, very stunning. I think it's going to be auditorily very impressive too. But given the studio's track record, I think gameplay is where it might start to struggle. But that's okay. That's okay. If the rest of it is good enough, it can pull up a lot of that. But you can see they have a lot of stuff they go through. They go through the music. They go through kind of how they went about doing all that. They have some more clips and stuff. All the footage they're showing is at 30 frames, which I would guess would be targeting that. That's my assumption, which is fine. They're doing this stop motion thing. I did hear that the stop motion sort of effect that they put on it is going to it's like it has a toggle. You can turn it off in the settings. It will still occur in cutscenes, but you can turn it off for gameplay if it causes like your brain just doesn't like it or something. I really like it. I won't be turning it off. I think it looks good, but I can understand if somebody didn't like it. But it's a very, very visually stunning game, and I love the setting. I love the art design. I just think, you know, as with a lot of these types of games, it's going to come down to gameplay. That's what's going to separate it out. But it looks really, really good. So I won't go through the whole thing because we'll be here all day if we do that. But IGN, they did a preview. They got to try it or something, is my understanding. Let's see what they say about it.
Indie darling Contrast, or were disappointed by 2016's We Happy Few, it's hard to argue that developer Compulsion Games doesn't swing for the fences and try new things. After spending a day with the team taking a closer look at South of Midnight, it's clear that innovation streak hasn't slowed down one bit, and I went from mild curiosity to full-blown hype for this unique action-adventure game.
Oh, he said the word! Oh no! Oh no! It's okay. It's okay. As long as somebody is aware that they're hyped and maybe not thinking about it super critically, that's okay. Okay. If you want to, like, some games you're just really excited for, you want to just turn off your skeptical mind. Okay. Okay. As long as you're aware you're doing that. It's when people like are lying to themselves and like, no, I'm still looking at it very critically. I just think that it looks amazing and I'm going to cry when I play it. It's like, okay, well, maybe we're getting a little silly. But if he's saying that what he saw was good enough for him to become hyped, okay, let's hear what did that for him. Let's see.
Though I didn't see anything that blew my socks off in terms of gameplay, it stood out in just about every other way.
It's so funny he says that, because what did I literally just get finished saying? It's a game that's probably going to excel visually, artistically, you know, in terms of sound, world building, atmosphere, that type of thing. But gameplay is what they historically have struggled with, and he just...
that blew my socks off in terms of for this unique action-adventure game. Though I didn't see anything that blew my socks off in terms of gameplay.
So already, like, the thing that I'm kind of feeling out seems to be confirmed by people who have, like, at least seen the game behind closed doors extensively. But we'll hear the rest of what he has to say. And again, let me be as clear as I can be about this. There are games that don't have a lot going on in the gameplay department that are still worth playing. I really like the Little Nightmares games, okay? I understand some people don't. I really like the Little Nightmares games. I love the art direction. I love the world building. I love the ambience. I love the music, or the sound design, all of that. I love it. I love those games. They don't have a lot going on in the gameplay department. A lot of it is hold the stick to the left and occasionally jump. Like, that's a lot of what they are. But they're still worth playing, I think, if you like those spooky settings and stuff like that. So just because a game that is excelling in these areas and maybe not doing so great over here, that does not mean the game is therefore bad and you should only look here. You got to take the whole thing into consideration. But what it does mean, when this is more mid-level, when this is more of a 6, 7 out of 10, you've got to start looking over here and hoping that that's so good it pulls everything up, right? So it just raises the bar for how good the rest of it has to be.
It stood out in just about every other way, especially with its striking setting, curious stop-motion animation, and stellar original soundtrack.
The soundtrack is one thing I'm really excited for. Oh, look, it's the logo. They put the bumper sticker on the car. That's cute. I like that. Gameplay is kind of important since it is, you know, a game, certainly. But there are some games that are not really games, you know? Like, is the gameplay in, like, Detroit Become Human particularly compelling? I'd say no. I mean, most of what you're doing is walking through levels, occasionally interacting with an object to pick it up, and then making dialogue choices. That's the gameplay. Quick time events too, but like, that's the gameplay. Still very good. I don't think it's a shortcoming of the game necessarily. It's more a shortcoming of the term video game. You know, not every video game has to be an ARPG. Not every video game has to have an inventory system or armor stuff. Like, not every video game needs to have all these different mechanics. Some video games are kind of, the term game is more just a limitation of our terminology, because they don't really work the same as like a video game. It's not really a game. It's more of a visual novel, an experience or whatever, you know? So it's a different thing. It's a different thing. And I think for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different. For some people, the story takes the helm. The gameplay can kind of suck, but if the story's really good, who cares? For other people, it might be the art direction and the visuals. They want to play photorealistic games. And if the story kind of sucks, or if the gameplay kind of sucks, that's okay, because they got what they're looking for. Everybody's going to be a little bit different here. And I don't think you're necessarily wrong for preferring gameplay over story, or story over gameplay. It's just a matter of tastes at that point.
That all left me eager to see more and play it for myself.
You mean to tell me your mama never told you stories about critters and weavers? Oh, you're lucky I come along.
A quick disclaimer before we get started. I wasn't provided footage of the hands-off demo shown at Compulsion Games' office, and so won't be able to show you all the things I saw. Instead, I'll be relying on existing, publicly available sources, and you'll just need to fill in the blanks.
Shaking bones. Been a while.
South of Midnight is set in a part of the world we don't see too often in games, the American Deep South. It isn't just a backdrop for you to fight monsters, but rather the entire premise on which the adventure sits, with characters, folklore, and mythical creatures all drawn from real-world places and stories. During a hands-off demo, I saw flooded wetlands after a recent storm, mosquito-riddled swamps, and ostentatious antebellum manors, each infused with elements of fantasy I'd not seen anywhere else. These exotic places fit nicely with an equally unusual art style that emulates stop-motion animation, yet another rarity in games, and one that would be sure to fog up Guillermo del Toro's glasses. The whole thing looks like it was ripped from the pages of a children's storybook, which I really dug. It definitely took some getting used to at first, as the jerky movement might easily be mistaken for frame rate wonkiness to the untrained eye, but it also adds to the otherworldly fantasy charm that South of Midnight oozes. It can sometimes be pretty difficult to understand how exactly a game will feel to play during a hands-off demo, but in the case of South of Midnight, touching a controller wasn't necessary to recognize its best quality: its music. Each level has you facing off against a cryptid from Deep South folklore as Southern-inspired blues and jazz intensifies, and the lyrics help tell the story of whatever beast you're tracking down. In the case of this demo, it was an enormous alligator called Two-Toed Tom, based on an actual legendary creature.
That's Two-Toed Tom. Big gator.
At first, the music started slow with a slick bass line and a choir whispering, "Two-Toed Tom." But by the time we unraveled the mystery of the mythical gator and progressed to the final confrontation, the chorus reached a fevered pitch, the words of which told the tale of poor old Tom. All of these components, the setting, art, and music, set South of Midnight apart in a major way, and made me extremely excited to get my hands on it. The flip side of that is that what I saw of gameplay offered far less originality. Combat looked like a pretty by-the-numbers system of dodging, striking, and finishing moves that are quite well trodden, and exploration relied on double jumping, mid-air dashing, and grappling to distant locations that are pretty standard stuff. The boss fight against Two-Toed Tom, for example, was a very repetitive process of leaping over telegraphed attacks and wailing on the gator when he presented obvious opportunity to do so. Compulsion Games says that while they expect gameplay to be engaging, it isn't nearly as much of a focus as the story, music, and other elements they've clearly put the lion's share of work into. Instead, they're keeping levels relatively short for a 10-ish hour story and putting all of their chips into South of Midnight's exceptional presentation and world building.
A really good 10 hours is better than a mediocre 70. I'll tell you what. But This is why also like Game Pass really alters the formula with this, because a lot of people are, well, I'm not paying $70 for this. The whole point, like part of the whole pitching process for games like this is that you get it through Game Pass. You already have the subscription, you just download it when it becomes available. You don't have the subscription, you can sign up for a single month for whatever, $15, and then play this in a weekend and play anything else for the rest of the 3-4 weeks that your membership is active. Like, Game Pass just fundamentally changes the equation and changes the math on this stuff. From like, don't buy it to, try it if you have a membership. And honestly, at $15 as like the access fee for Game Pass, like this would have to suck pretty hard for you to not be like, yeah, go try it, you know? Because it's just a really impressive lineup there. But all of this to say, a 10-hour experience that's really good and really high production value and polished, I'm all for, but it's got to be solid. People I've seen in chat are bringing up like Hellblade 2. That game looked really well, but didn't have good gameplay. Honestly, like Hellblade 2 was so disappointing because it was not just that it was kind of lackluster in scope and scale or gameplay or whatever. It was that it was a step backwards from the first game in almost every single way possible. Not just in terms of the scale, but also like the story. There was basically no real story. It just ends as soon as it's picking up steam. There's like no gameplay improvements over the first game. And in fact, there seemed to be actively like less mechanics going on, less gameplay in the second game than there was in the first. There's way more just walking, way less combat, way less puzzles, all that stuff. Like everywhere you looked, it was a downgrade from the first game, which is why that game was so lackluster and poorly received. With this, there is no foundation to look at. There's no first game to look at. They get a chance to kind of set the standard here. And if it really is 10 hours of really high polish, high production value, very unique art styles and visuals and stories, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Is it something I would pay $70 for? It's going to have to be real good for me to recommend a 10-hour, $70 game. But again, that's why Game Pass is kind of magic. Game Pass, it just changes the math on these considerations.
So far, I'm convinced they just might pull it off. After all, even without playing it myself, it's made a great impression on me. Here's hoping it delivers when we finally get to play it next year.
I'll pick you up yonder after to go find your mom.
For more, check out our previews of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle and Alien Rogue Incursion. And for
I also find this interesting that they chose to fly out somebody from IGN to look at a hands-off demo in tandem with this. Like I find it really interesting. It's really bizarre. So I'm not sure. I mean, I'm glad that we're getting some previews, but it feels like if you're going to have somebody fly all the way out to your studio, you would at least let them play it. Like if you're at Summer Game Fest or the Game Awards something and you go behind closed doors there when you're already there to do it, okay. But it seems odd to spend all that money to bring somebody out just to like watch basically what could be a video, you know? It's interesting. Some people are saying, can consumers start getting demos again? I think the point is like Game Pass basically treats most big releases as one gigantic demo. The idea is you're subscribed to the $15 a month service and you can try it. And if you love it, great, you finish it. If you don't love it, you just uninstall it and you didn't lose that much compared to the rest of the catalog. You just go download some other game they have in the catalog that you like more. I do think that Game Pass will change how a lot of this stuff is marketed though, because I mean, just frankly, you don't really need a lot of previews. You don't need to build hype. You don't need to do all this stuff for a lot of these types of games. You just build out the portfolio. You build out the library of content available to people. And if the art style seems interesting, they're going to try it and check it out. So I would expect that like this is going to be another one of those games that is very, very limited in terms of previews, in terms of reviews, because it's short for one, and I think that there's just not much benefit to it. I'm saying this as somebody that would benefit from them doing previews and like letting me make a video where I tried it early, you know, I would benefit from that directly, but I'm telling you just clearly, I don't think the game would benefit much from that. I think you just put it out there, and if people are interested, they download it, and if they're not, they're not. Like a lot of the big inflated budgets with a lot of video games nowadays is overspending on marketing. I'll tell you, like some of these TikTok dudes I know, they've gotten paid for certain like game promotions. Not like the stereotypical, I tried the Smash Defense Tower game and it was really good. Not those kinds of videos, but like videos where they're like, I got to see this game that's coming up behind closed doors, and I'm here to tell you about the latest stuff with South of Midnight. Let's get into it. You know, those types of videos. One of the dudes told me he got paid like $5,000-$6,000 for a 60-second TikTok. I don't know of anybody that is like, I was gonna wait on the game, but I saw a TikTok that was really good, so I'm gonna buy it now. I haven't seen anybody do that. Like, nobody. But these companies are spending wild amounts of money promoting their games through some of these social media platforms, and I'm telling you what, guys, I don't think it's worth it. And I'm telling you as somebody that you might be considering giving money to talk about your game, and I'm telling you, I think your money's better spent elsewhere. Okay, money's great, but some of these companies will throw so much money trying to market it when all you should really be focusing on is spending that money to make a game that's more compelling, and then people will talk about it anyways. Gaming YouTubers, streamers, TikTokers, if the game is really compelling, they'll talk about it anyways because it's interesting. I'm talking about this game right now, and I wasn't paid to talk about it, but I'm talking about it because it seems really unique and interesting. But some companies have this attitude where they're like, well, we have to pay people to talk about it. It's like, no. Honestly, if you have to pay a gaming TikToker to talk about your game and they weren't going to talk about it otherwise, either that gaming TikToker is just trying to like withhold coverage, you know, where it's pay to play, or your game wasn't that compelling to begin with. You know, your goal should be to make the most compelling game possible, so you don't have to pay for marketing. You don't have to pay for YouTubers to talk about it. You know, it's ridiculous. But anyway, going back to all of this, I think that they should have a much leaner marketing style with this. I think their approach right here with the documentary stuff to really explain the world and explain what they're doing, I like that a lot more. One interesting thing here I'm noticing with the combat, so you see that watch this guy in the background, there's this enemy here, but you get him down, you finish him, and then this guy's just kind of like, he shot at you, but he's just going to kind of sit in the corner, and then they freeze for the finishers and stuff. I'm guessing this is a game where the gameplay is going to be pretty lackluster. So the main reason to play it would be for the story, the world building, the music, and art direction and stuff like that, which it seems like all of those sides of it are very, very good. So that could be perfectly great. That could be, you know, enough to go check out the game. But it does seem like this is not a game that's going to excel when it comes to the gameplay department. It seems like that's going to be pretty lackluster, but could still very well be worth checking out. We will see. Kina Man's Guy says it's like Kina. Yeah, if you don't remember Kina Bridge of Spirits, that is a phenomenal comparison. It was a game put together by a studio that previously did like a lot of animation work, like I forget what kind of short films and stuff they made, but they were an animation studio first. That's what they were really, really good at, was animation stuff. And you could tell, I mean, the game was visually stunning. The game in terms of the animation quality was very, very good. It was just done tremendously well. These little guys were so cute. It was really, really well done in that way. Majora's Mask Terrible Fate. Yeah, that's one that they made. So this was a game where the gameplay was also like pretty lackluster, pretty simple, really, really straightforward, not complicated whatsoever. And a lot of people kind of fell off it because it just wasn't that compelling. But it was a visual sight to behold. It was gorgeous. It presented itself very, very well, but there wasn't a lot of depth there. And I think that this game is going to be kind of similar to that. I think South of Midnight will be similar, where a lot of people will play it and love it because of the visual presentation, because of the sound design and art design. But if you're somebody that's looking for like a really intense game, you probably will find it like kind of not that compelling. But that's okay, because it's Game Pass. And if you don't like it, just delete it, download something else. Easy peasy. He took my thing.